Well, welcome everybody to the Power of Our Story. I'm Jeremy Gronau. I'm going to be going through chapter 2 of the book of Matthew today. Thank you, everybody who's on this call and everybody who's going to watch this call later on as a recording. I'm honored to be with you, Sarah, for hosting this, and glad everybody has joined in today. Before I dive in, I'd like to open us up in prayer, and then we'll get started on the Word of God. Heavenly Father, I thank you. I thank you for this time where we can join in fellowship and be circled around your word. And I pray that you open our eyes, you open our ears, so that way we can hear your word clearly, that we can learn new truths about you, and that you can continue to reveal yourself, your character, and your son Jesus to us every single day. I pray for everybody who's in attendance today and anybody who will watch this recording. I pray for them. I pray for their families. I pray for their peace, their strength, and your guidance in their life, Lord. I pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Well, we're going to pick up from chapter 2 today. The title I'm giving today's discussion and reading is going to be Humble Beginnings. And what we'll see here as we explore chapter 2 is a continuation of the humble beginning of Jesus Christ. And I'd like to kind of point out a few things as we go through this. We're also going to see as Matthew continues to tie that linchpin between the Old Testament and the fulfillment of Jesus Christ as we continue reading his story. We're picking up from the Old Testament. This is a continuation. This isn't a new story. This is a continuation of the old story and how Jesus is the fulfillment of that prophesied story. Additionally, I'd like to talk about the underlying themes in this text, along with some of the meanings and the supernatural divine guidance that you'll see as we read through chapter 2. So with that being said, chapter 2, verse 1, I'm reading from the English Standard Version. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go, search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. We'll stop there for a second. So, what I want to draw from this first is to kind of talk about who the wise men are. And it's easy to read past this and just say, hey, these are a couple of wise guys following a star to go find Jesus. And that's not what Matthew is describing at all. These characters that are coming into this story are, think of astronomers. That's the best way today to describe them. They're what we would call modern day astronomers. They spend their pretty wealthy because they have, as you can see, gold, frankincense, and all these gifts for Jesus. So they're pretty wealthy men, but they follow astronomy in a very critical way. And the other point to highlight is these men are not Jews. These are Gentile men. They we think they come from Persia. Okay. And so what this should tell you is there's really in this first part, there's two different kind of character portrayals. You see these people that are outside the covenant of God coming to worship the new king of that covenant. And then you see the people who are already inside of the covenant. So you see King Herod and you see the rest of Jerusalem. They are frightened by this, right? They are they are not happy with this prophecy fulfillment that's happening because they know that it's going to jeopardize their power and their control that they have and their rule that is happening today. And so I think this is a good portrayal of the two types of hearts that people can have as they approach the throne and as they approach God. Where on one hand you see the wise men, the astronomers that are following divine guidance in a humble way with the posture of worship. And then you see, on the other hand, the people that are in the power and are in control are fighting to maintain that control. And Herod, by no means, when he says, "Hey, go and find this boy, and when you find him, let me know so I can come worship him." That's a complete lie. He's not wanting to worship him, as we'll see later on. He really wants to kill him. And so I just wanted to highlight, I think it's very interesting that you see that this theme building that is also a continuation of the Old Testament, where um, it's this is written by a Jew for the Jews, but you see um, Matthew is really calling out the Jews at the beginning of this story. That's part of the reason why I believe that this book is so true, is because it's written by Jewish people, but it doesn't hold them in a good light for most of the stories. It's really calling out the people that are in power and the people that are, I would say, that know the most about the Jewish religion. And so we'll see this theme pick up and continue as we continue to read Matthew. But I want to open it up. Any questions, any thoughts with what we've read so far? All right, we'll continue on. Picking up from verse 13. Now, when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Rise, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet: "Out of Egypt I called my son." Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all the region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more. But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph, Egypt, saying, "Rise, take the child and his mother, go to the land of Israel. For those who sought the child's life are dead." And he rose and took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in the place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there, and being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in a city called Nazareth, so that so that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled, that he would be called a Nazarene. All right. So as you can see, we're continuing on the supernatural divine guidance that occurred in the first chapter is picking up and continuing into chapter 2. On numerous occasions here, you see Joseph being warned in a dream by an angel. And how we think of angels today is not really how a first century Jew would think of angels. The word really literally means in translation messenger, right? And so he's getting a message in a dream from a messenger. This is a supernatural occurrence where he's being warned by God's divine providence. And what's so amazing is even when somebody tries to interject their own plan into God's plan, he uses that against them to fulfill his own plan, because all of these things were prophesied in the Old Testament, everything from him leaving and then coming out of Egypt. When you hear that, what Matthew is trying to draw a parallel to is Moses in the story of Israel, right? He's saying that here is the new Israel coming out of the land of Egypt. And here is the new Moses. Jesus is the new Moses. He was in Egypt and then he's coming out of Egypt. And then he's going to the place and living in the place that was in Nazareth that was prophesied in the Old Testament. And as you see, what we'll pick up later on is in the same way, the parallel of Jesus's baptism is like Israel going through the Red Sea. And so Matthew is drawing all these parallels from here's the Old Testament, here are the old stories, and we're picking them back up. Here's the new Jesus, here's the new Israel, here's the new Moses. And he's really drawing a correlation between all of those different stories. And I think that's so amazing. If you look at one of the fulfillments, he talked about Micah 5:2, but you, Bethlehem, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Right? Here, when Matthew is quoting this, he's trying to draw our attention to the location of the birth of Jesus, the nature of the Messiah, and the divine origin in which he's coming. The Ancient of Times is where we get the Ancient of Days. This isn't just a normal birth. This is somebody who has pre-existed before he's even coming into the earth, which is really hard to wrap your brain around, if you could be honest with yourself. Let's see. The other thing I want to come back to is the Magi. So these are the wise men. They're really called the Magi. These are Gentiles who recognize Jesus as Messiah. This also indicates the universal scope of the Messiah's mission, right? We talked about it last week with seeing the women in Jesus's bloodline, of which most of them were not Jewish. And here we are again, we're seeing the right posture to God and the receptive heart of God is coming from the people outside of the covenant of God. So this is a global mission that you'll see when we end in chapter 28 with the great commission where Jesus says, therefore go and make disciples of all nations. This is the beginning trail of that you see in the book of Matthew, where the Gentiles are being brought in, and it's not just to the Jew. Let's see, what else would I want to call out? Any questions with what we've discussed so far? Any thoughts on what we've said?
I just appreciate the things that you're highlighting. I mean, to be honest with you, Jeremy, I don't know how many times I've read this, but you're highlighting things that I have skimmed over. And it's really exciting to hear your explanation and, to hear more of the background and hear more of the depth of the first two chapters. So, this is more just a comment. And then also it does, it's amazing And it's also, I think, just a warning about human nature again, too, just the things that you're bringing out, that even people could be right in the right place, the right heritage, everything. But if it threatens their power, look what they are capable of. Look what Herod did, the pain that he caused just to keep his power. So I just appreciate what you're highlighting here. It's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, those are great insights. I think on that same note, what I find so interesting is right before God is about to bring about his plan of redemption with an individual, we see in the Old Testament and we see in the New Testament, we see a mass abortion take place right before that happens. Right? You saw that with Moses. Moses was hidden by his mother, put into a little basket and sent into the water, right? And that should also draw some parallels to Noah's story, right? Noah was encapsulated in a boat and then sent out in the water and protected by God in the same way that Moses was, in the same way that we see that Jesus is right now. And not to go political on us here, but today we have more abortions happening. I think it's over 70 million abortions happening per year that's recorded by the World Health Organization. So that lends the question, what is something big about to happen on God's calendar, because there's a big push for abortions that are happening? But it should highlight that to us, that all these terrible things are happening, but God is going to leverage all those terrible things to bring about his plan of redemption. It really shows the sovereignty of God in all of this. You see Herod really fighting against the power struggle with God and the fulfillments of the Old Testament. And it's just so silly to me. You don't have to read that far in the Bible to realize that you're not going to win against God. And here is Herod thinking that he's going to destroy the plan that's fulfilled by the prophets. And so it makes you question, is like, in his desires and in his heart, you can see in his actions that he doesn't believe that these are going to come true. And you can see it in his actions. So I find it so interesting that there's all these correlations. You look at Herod and you look at Pharaoh when you go and read those stories. It's the same type of person. It's that same type of person being portrayed again. And again, what's crazy, talking about the Gentiles fulfilling the plan of God, who is it that picks up Moses and cares for Moses? It's an Egyptian woman. Is the Pharaoh's daughter, right? She is the one that fulfills the plan and takes care of God's prophet that is going to bring about redemption for his people. It wasn't the Jewish people that saved Moses. It was, the Egyptian woman, a person outside of the covenant. So I think it's a call for all of us. It doesn't matter where we're at. Like you said, Sarah, what background that we have, you can participate in the plan of redemption. That is your choice, or you can fight it. And if you fight it, you can look through the evidence that's here for thousands of years. I can promise you that you're not going to win. So I'd rather be on the side of redemption. The other thing I wanted to highlight too, as well, is that the wise men, they brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Does anybody understand the symbolism there of the gold, frankincense, and myrrh? So the gold represents kingship. So these are all pointing to Jesus's ministry. The gold represents his kingship. The frankincense represents priesthood. So he is the new priest. And then myrrh is actually what would be used as an embalming agent, represents the suffering and the burial of Jesus, what he is about to do. And so these are all little pieces and little signals of what this ministry, what's going to take place in this ministry of Jesus. Well, I don't have any other notes. I'd love to open it up for discussion and see if there's any questions around this text, see if there's any questions about what we read last week, or just general opinions. Love to hear what you guys think.
So I have this isn't biblical or anything, but maybe you can find some correlations for it. Two friends of mine have talked about the structure of water. There's a documentary about it, and when you mentioned Moses in the water, Jesus in the water, and Noah in the water. So the premise between for this documentary of the structure of water is that water has memory. And you know, and this is a stretch, but I feel it. Um, I may not be able to articulate it as well as the brilliant scientists that were on there, but they were saying that water remembers the actions going on in a civilization at a certain time. And it just kind of freezes and then it thaws out and then it flows and so forth. So, one of the strange things, which kind of explains this better, is whenever I hear about Eastern Bloc countries, it always makes my heart, I just have such a heart for that people group, and I don't know why. And then I found out that my cousin, who happens to be a Jewish rabbi, he's a Messianic Jew. So I questioned him one day and I said, "Well, I thought you couldn't be a rabbi unless you're of the tribe of Levi." And he goes, "We are of the tribe of Levi, cousin." And I was like, "What?" And then he told me that we're also of Ukrainian descent. And I knew about the Russian, I knew about the Polish, I didn't know about the Ukrainian. So whenever I hear about it, it's like it pulls at my heart, which is weird. And so one of the friends that mentioned the structure of water was saying it's because uh, you that I guess the it just carries forward because that's where your family is from, kind of thing. And anyway, I just wanted to ask if there is any correlation for the memory of water and the structure of water as it transcends the decades and the centuries in this case.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. One thing as I heard you speak that I wanted to speak into you is it's probably not a coincidence that you're drawn to that, right? You have that draw to the east into that people group that comes what I believe is a desire in your heart from God or your people, right? And it sounds like that's what you're starting to uncover. So that would be my thoughts on that. And as far as water goes, in the memory of water, I haven't listened to that. Be open to hearing the scientists you were speaking about speak to that. I couldn't tell you from a scientific perspective, but I could tell you that in the Bible, water um, is a common theme that you see everything from baptism to, like I said, drawing back to the very beginning of the Bible. You even look in Eden, there's a river that flows through Eden that gives life. And then if you look at the way that the Middle East is structured today, it's the complete opposite of Eden, right? There you have wadis there that when it rains a lot, a bunch of water pours through, and then everything dries up again, and the land just sucks up all the water. And so you see that symbolism of, when God is present, there's abundant life and there's water flowing, because really water is the lifeblood of the human civilization. If you look, everything from the right, Moses is sent to Egypt. Egypt is one of the largest and most profound civilizations, and it has the Nile flowing right through it. And you see that as a common theme where water is what is bringing life. A symbolism of the outpouring of the Holy Spirit is described in the Bible as water coming down from heaven, right? The dew on the earth, the dew on the grass is a symbolism of the Spirit hovering over, right? Hovering over us, hovering over the land, and providing revelations from God. So I would say that there's a lot of themes in as far as the Bible is uh, the biblical view as far as water is concerned with the revelations of God and the life-giving capacity. You think about when Jesus reveals himself as Messiah for the first time, he does it to a woman and he does it at a well, right? And he says that he is the water that is going to bring life, right? He is the water of life, that it gives life never ending, you know? So I would agree with you on that capacity. Hopefully I answered your question there.
And to your point, the woman at the well, who was the Samaritan, the half-breed, the most disrespected type of woman. Yeah, so many parallels with many of these things.
Again, that's why like I believe that's why you can hold the truthfulness of the Bible, is because it's written by Jewish people, and everything speaks against Jewish heritage with how God is revealing himself. He's doing it to Gentiles. He's doing it to shepherds, as you see in the book of Luke, in this same chapter 2 text that you see. He reveals himself by an angel comes and talks to the shepherds. Shepherds were looked down in that culture. So he's really, I think he's drawing a story of his character, which is how humble God is. He's showing himself to the lowly, to the people that were looked down on society first, right? Those are the people that are getting revealed. Let's say, use the water example. Those are the people that are drinking from the water of life, the people that would normally not get things in this life. So that's pretty amazing.
I have a few observations, if you don't mind. I put a couple links in the chat, and the first one is Dr. Emoto, and he's pretty amazing. He does research, or I think he passed, but he did research about the reaction of water to sound, and then when you see sometimes the salt or sand experiments, and he has been able to track with positive words and positive engagement, how water changes to these beautiful crystalline forms when he films it. And words of discouragement, not encouragement, will change it to this blackish sludge looking thing. And his experimentation, though really hard to comprehend, even the written word put by flowing water will change the crystalline structure of it. So putting, for example, swearing, bad words, or things like that by the water in written form will change the structure of the water too. And so I put a link to him. I'm not sure if it's the best one, but once you start going down that rabbit hole, it really talks about water as almost a living form or entity. And when you consider some of the ancient practices of ancient cultures, they talk about elemental magic or elemental spiritism, which includes water and fire. Well, those are the things that God used to communicate to us on many levels. And perhaps if we take out the paganism from that, there is a spiritual sense, because Jesus talks about the living water and the living fire. And the world was once destroyed by the water at God's instruction. And then the next time it will be with fire, we know, at God's instruction. So I think it's pretty fascinating. And if you're interested, encourage you to look at that and kind of go down that rabbit hole, because I think it's a good discussion for anyone who wants to. I put a second link there for the Samaritan woman at the well. And though not canonized in Catholic literature, in the Book of Saints, she is named Fotini. And her history is amazing, because after her encounter with Jesus, remember, before she had 5 husbands, was essentially living in adultery and sin, and all of these things. And he, in one of many very counter sociology and counter culture movements, talked to a woman, which would not normally be in place for him. She was there at a different time, in part because of the shame that she experienced from the other women who would gather at the same time every day. And then she was a woman who was a Samaritan who didn't communicate. They didn't communicate with the Jews. Yet he showed his humility and humbleness talking to her, and really, as a man, honored women, which was counterculture at that time too, where they were a very patriarchal society. She, after that encounter, ran into the town and began, as we know from the biblical account, speaking about her encounter with Jesus. and her entire family became resistors, so to speak, of the encroaching Roman Empire. And the accounts of her are miraculous accounts about her enduring torture without any injury, like her hands being hit with steel bars and trying to break her hands over and over, and her family being burned alive and withstanding and staying strong in the faith. And so she is said to be responsible for turning the hearts of at least hundreds of people towards Christ after her encounter. And I think that's pretty amazing in and of itself. And then, if you don't mind, I'd like to add one more note. And none of this is my wisdom or research. It's stuff I've been fortunate by the wisdom of others, biblical scholars, to be led to, and just followed their lead and researched it myself. The three wise men that you spoke of are believed to herald from Daniel and the school of prophets and the school of the mystics, because remember that Daniel, when he was sent to Babylon, and as I understand it, was a eunuch, was put in charge of the magicians, mystics, and prophets. And Daniel began cultivating a school where he and his prophecies were so aligned and exact that he was able to predict the time that Christ arrived in Bethlehem. And so this school of prophets and school of mystics split into two directions. And the mystics were the mages and sages that you saw coming as the three wise men later as Jesus arrived in Bethlehem. And my understanding, they don't just travel by themselves because they were considered to be kings in their own right. They had their entire entourage, which would be at least hundreds strong. Yes, very cool. Exactly. Thank you, Jeremy, for putting that in there. But also, the other branch of that was the school of prophets, from which Elijah and Elisha came from. And remember the amazing things that they accomplished that were later known as the Essenes. And the Essenes followed the priest Zadok. And that calendar is said to be the most accurate calendar to this day, that also, if we look at that, reflects current events with accuracy. And they were the protectors of the Qumran, or they're also called the tribe of Qumran, the Essenes, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which have revealed to us a lot of information. And remember that Daniel said that these books shall be sealed until the end. And that information was first discovered in 1941. And even, I think, as early as last week or the week before, more Dead Sea Scrolls were uncovered, revealing more current information. And John the Baptist is said to herald from the Essenes, and the 3 years of Jesus's life where he is unaccounted for, it's thought that he perhaps went there to instruct the Essenes, the school of the prophets in that modern day sense, and instruct them. And they were called the Way because they practiced following the Way, which was later the name given to the early Christians. So it's believed that the Essenes, who were a Jewish sect, blended with Christianity and ended up merging to become one with them and following the Way. So I think it's fascinating. And I think I probably mentioned, if you haven't heard any of that, a couple of things that are pretty easily researched. And there's an abundance of information that most Christians never even hear about. And I think is fascinating. And one of the things that looped me into Christianity, like you with your love for Book of Matthew. I'm sorry if I spoke too long.
Great. Thank you. Well, one thing that I added, that link that I sent, I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with Dr. Michael Heiser. He's an Old Testament scholar. I think he passed away at the beginning of last year, but love his books. He actually, that video that I sent, he goes through with an astronomy program on a computer. You can put in, you can download pretty much any astronomy program, and it can tell you where the constellations are at any given time, because everything is in constant motion and it's at the same speed that it was. So you can see the constellation, you can see the planets' alignment. And what he actually goes through is he talks about what you saw in the sky when Jesus was born. And it's almost exactly what's described in Revelation 12 by John. with a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. And you can continue reading that, but he goes through the text and shows you where the constellations were at and what exactly these wise men saw and why they saw, or why they thought the Messiah had come. And it's pretty crazy. It aligns perfectly with the birth of Jesus, all these constellations when you put it into a program. So it's like mind-boggling to think about that this is actually what they saw and this is why they came to Jerusalem.
And to add to that, I'm sure you know this, but Dr. Michael Heiser hypothesizes that the actual date of Jesus's birth, we know, wasn't December 25th, but did you see which date he came up with?
I know it was 3 AD, right? It was the year of 3 AD. I forget what month and date it was.
I think it was
September
summer.
11th.
Okay, because the shepherds would have been out in the field with their sheep, and it's too cold if it was December, and they would have been somewhere else.
Yes, they brought the sheep indoors during that time.
Yeah.
And then I love this stuff. So I'm sorry, I really I
No,
get
this is
excited, Jeremy. But
exciting.
one of the things about Jesus talking about I'm the door, and if you knock, I'll enter, has great representation to people who understand being a shepherd, because when they brought the sheep in, they would sleep in the doorway to protect against any predators, animals, or thieves. And so there are all those passages about the thief calling the sheep or sneaking in at night. And a lot of that represents the shepherd protecting them, sleeping in that doorway. So when Jesus talks about being the door, it creates a new image of him actually sleeping by his flocks. But you're right, it was too cold. They didn't have their sheep out. And very interesting to me too, that September 11th is the possible date when Jesus was actually born, because so many bad things have happened on or around that date historically. And it makes sense. If I was in opposition and trying to create a dark kingdom that would destroy the kingdom of good of our God, I would take those significant dates and try to destroy them as well. So I really appreciate this, Jeremy. I love this conversation.
This is great. This is great. I thought about, as you were mentioning, the imagery that you see with the shepherds is the anointing oil. So, there's a lot of prayers about anointing oil and how we are to be anointed, but shepherds would put oil on their sheep's face and ears to keep flies out, right? And I think about, the enemy attack is usually right here, right? He goes after the mind, and if he can control the mind, he can control the heart, and he can control your will. He can control what you do. Whereas if we anoint ourselves, we're essentially putting on repellent against the schemes and attacks of the enemy. And so I love that imagery as well. I think there's so many things that you can dive into with the shepherds and the wise men and all this imagery that we're seeing just come out in the introduction of this book. So I'm excited to see where this study goes. But I thank you, Patrick. That was great.
And with sheep themselves, there's so much information about that animal. Sheep are naturally adverse to the bites of poisonous snakes. They have a natural antidote within their blood. So then when you take that meaning and you think about the Lamb of God and the fact that the devil is represented as a serpent, a dragon, a snake, and it says that you shall tread upon the heads of the lion and the snakes, or the snakes, the adders, the poisonous snakes, and the scorpions, it gives an entirely new meaning. And when he says, go as sheep among wolves and be as wise as serpents, but as gentle as doves, it gives even more meaning to me, to just see these amazing little miraculous things that have occurred in the creation of all God's creatures.
That's awesome. So good. Well, thanks everybody for the participation today. Any final thoughts? Any last thoughts on this text?
Something about the sheep, just that the Egyptians did not like the Israelites, and they just said, just go over here to Goshen or wherever it was they were, because the Egyptians didn't want to be around the sheep because they thought they were disgusting creatures. And yet, look at their resilience, look at their purpose, and all the things that Patrick, you had mentioned, and Jeremy. That's kind of cool, huh? Just
Yeah. And you see that in the Old Testament when Joseph comes with his father and his brothers. He tells the Pharaoh that, they're just sheep herders and they don't need to be threatened by them. And that was kind of the derogatory term he used to get his family into Egypt when he was second in command over Egypt. So it's that theme portrays over and over again. Holly, any thoughts from you? I thought for a second you were about to speak up, but I didn't want to step on you and wanted to give you an opportunity to speak.
I just, number one, want to thank you all. There's so much wisdom here, and I appreciate this. I love it. My goodness, Patrick, I could just sit at your knees and listen all day. You have so much, I just, something, Tammy, I just wanted to share when you brought that up about water and the memory. It gave me an answer to something that has that happened a few years back to me, and it all, boy, does it fit what you're talking about. In yeah, like 2020. We went up to, well, we are from northern Minnesota. My boys were all born up there, and we spent all of their childhood on the water. And we still have property on the lake that they grew up swimming in and fishing in and catching turtles in. And so that's where I gravitate to when I am, especially one of my sons, most of you know, was killed in Afghanistan. So when I am in that place where I need comfort, that's my place. That's my special place. But on the day of the 10th anniversary to the day, and every anniversary, I always wake up at the time that he was killed. It's just my biorhythms just do. And just in case, I always set my alarm so I don't miss that time. It's a precious time for me just to be with God awake. So that particular, it was the 10th year, we were up there on that lake where my boys had grown up and, learned, spent all their time swimming. And at 3:45 a.m., I went down. That was our time that he was killed in Afghanistan. I got up earlier and went down to the water. And it was a really nasty day. This is October in northern Minnesota. And October can be beautiful, but sometimes it can be it was cold and sleety and windy, and the way there were like whitecaps on the water. I was on the deck. I went out on the deck and I just stood there, but I was focused on the sky. And at the time, and I do that, just like looking up at the stars and waiting for 3:45, that moment, that 10 years to the time. And when that moment, what happened was I'm looking up at the sky, and all of a sudden the wind, the sleet, the whitecaps, the water was glass. It became glass. And I stood there for 3 minutes, for 3 solid minutes. There was not a sound. All the loons stopped, because they were loud, and all of the noise, the rustling in the lake, everything stopped. It was 3 minutes of pure silence and glass. And then it started right back up, and I ran back in the house. But I'll never forget that moment. And I remember writing right away afterwards about how I felt, and I have never heard what you brought up today ever heard of this before, but I remember writing that Fall Lake honored my Danny and the memories of his childhood along its shores. So I don't need any scientific, I'm going to go right to those sites, but I'll tell you, I don't need, I just want you to know that I experienced the water's memory and the gift that God gave me, knowing that lake remembered my son.
Please look at the documentary, because it explains there's a story in there, and you guys might I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a story that is very much in line of what you're explaining. So I'm now you guys have to go look at it. And the scientist that Patrick mentioned, he's in there, and it is true. I actually have a structured water machine now because of that friend, and it uses magnets, and you're supposed to speak life over it. They talk about holy water. I mean, there is something to this, and it's so cool. You know, all the parallels that Jeremy brought up, and Patrick, all your stuff that you brought up was it's amazing. So thank you everyone for sharing that. And thank you, Holly. I think we're like gonna have to redo our makeup, but in a good way. So thank you for sharing.
Beautiful.
I'll show you something here. Well, this is a 528, and this is a 444 hertz tuning fork. And it's interesting because they talk about tones and how our body vibrates at different frequencies. And there is a 440 hertz tone, which is called the devil's chord. And the devil's chord is what you hear like in a scary movie when the UFO or the monster arrives, that super low chord. And it's very ominous. And if you listen to music, 90% of modern music is tuned to the 444 hertz. And we know that music can influence us and our behavior and attitude. It can pick us up or whatever. But when you listen to the 444 hertz, it has a profoundly different calming effect, and it's called the angelic frequency. And so I take these and I use them as I'm growing. You probably can't see it behind me. I have a bunch of plants started during the winter in my window here for when spring comes around, because the soil is frozen right now, to plant all kinds of potatoes and onions and stuff. And then I have a start because we have such a short summer here in Seattle. So I use this in the water, and as an experiment, I did it on some of the water and not others. And the ones that I did it to are flourishing. And the ones that I didn't,
Oh,
I have to change the water more often because it turns, well, gross, slimy and stuff. So I think it's amazing. And I feel that there are healing properties in this when I do it, and I, use the vibration of the base, like I put it on an ailment or a skin issue or something like that. So perhaps it's just extremely strong faith which guides me to that, and perhaps it is a placebo effect, but perhaps there's something more to it as well. So.
Maybe look.
yeah.
That's
So, no, sorry, go ahead, Jeremy. I was
just going to say that's so cool. I love hearing about things like that. I heard a story about a man that had a couple lemon trees, and he took one lemon from one of his lemon trees and put it in the tithing basket at his church. And now that tree only produces like lemons that are this big. So it's so cool. And yeah, I've seen the picture of the lemon. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's crazy. So I believe that God can work miracles in any way. And as we're reading through this text, he can work his miracles even through the most unbelieving people, the people that are fighting against him so hard. And so we'll pick this up next week and we'll continue reading chapter 3. But I love the participation. I love all the input. You guys are bringing up some great things that I didn't even think of. So awesome. Thank you all. And thank everybody that's on listening.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. That was incredible. Thank
it
you.
was. Thank you.